Dr. Juan stared at his computer screen with wide eyes. The numbers were wrong. They had to be wrong. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again. The atmospheric monitoring station in Seoul was showing readings that made no sense. Mina, come look at this, he called to his partner across the lab. Dr. Mina walked over, her coffee cup still steaming in her hands. She was used to Juan getting excited about small changes in air pressure or wind patterns. But when she saw his face, she knew this was different. What am I looking at? She asked, leaning over his shoulder. These are the readings from the last hour. Look at the atmospheric density measurements. Juan pointed at the screen with a shaking finger. Mina nearly dropped her coffee. The readings showed massive objects entering Earth's atmosphere. Not meteors or space debris. These were controlled, moving in perfect formation. Call Commander Tay. Now, she whispered. Within minutes, alarms were ringing throughout the United Nations Defense Command Center. Commander Tay rushed into the atmospheric monitoring room, still pulling on his uniform jacket. What do we have? He asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. 16 large objects, Commander. They entered our atmosphere 20 minutes ago. Each one is about the size of a city block, Juan explained, his hands moving quickly across his keyboard to bring up tracking data. Where are they now? Tay demanded. They've stopped moving. They're just hanging there. Over major cities around the world. Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai. Mina's voice got quieter with each city name. Commander Tai felt his stomach drop. This was it. The day every military leader had secretly feared but never really believed would come. First contact, and it didn't look peaceful. Get me President Kim on the line, and contact the other defense ministers immediately, Tay ordered his assistant. Above Seoul, something impossible hung in the sky. The ship was massive, its dark metal surface smooth and perfect. It made no sound. No exhaust, no engines firing, nothing. It just floated there like it belonged. People on the street stopped walking. They pointed and stared. Some took pictures with their phones. Others ran. The ship was so big it blocked out the sun, casting a shadow over half the city. Inside the ship, Commander Kelnar of the Keltharian Empire studied the data flowing across his screens. His species had been watching this little blue planet for months. They had run every test, analyzed every piece of information they could gather. Atmospheric composition confirmed, his science officer reported. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, trace amounts of argon and carbon dioxide. Exactly as our long-range scans indicated. Any threats to our equipment? Kelnar asked. None detected, Commander. Our armor systems rate the atmosphere as completely safe. Compatibility at 100%. Kelnar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. This would be easier than they had hoped. The humans had primitive technology, a simple atmosphere, and no real defenses. His people had conquered dozens of worlds. This one would fall in days, maybe hours. Begin the landing sequence. Deploy ground forces to all major population centers, he commanded. Back in the Seoul Command Center, Juan watched his screens fill with new contacts. Smaller ships were separating from the main vessels heading toward the ground. They're landing, he announced to the room. Commander Tay grabbed his radio. All units, this is command. We have hostile ships landing in multiple locations. Do not engage unless fired upon. I repeat, do not engage unless you are fired upon first. The first Keltharian dropship touched down in a park near the center of Seoul. The landing was perfect, silent, and precise. A ramp lowered from the ship's side and figures began walking out. The aliens were tall, maybe 7 feet, with long arms and legs. Their skin was pale gray and their faces were sharp and angular. But the most impressive thing about them was their armor. The suits they wore seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed and shifted around their bodies. The armor changed color constantly, from silver to black to deep blue, adapting to the light around them. Helmets covered their heads completely, with dark visors that showed nothing of the faces beneath. Captain Hyun was part of the first response team to reach the landing site. He crouched behind a concrete barrier with his squad, watching the aliens through binoculars. How many do you count? His sergeant whispered. 20, maybe 25. They're not taking defensive positions. They're just standing there, Hyun replied. The aliens had formed a perfect circle around their ship. They weren't pointing weapons at anything. They weren't building defenses. They just stood and waited like they owned the place. Then one of them stepped forward. It raised its hand and a voice came from its armor. The words were in perfect Korean. People of Earth, we are the Keltharian Empire. We have come to bring order to your world. Captain Hyun felt his blood run cold. The alien's voice was calm, almost bored. Your governments will surrender all authority to us within 72 hours. You will be relocated to areas where you can live safely under our protection. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. The alien paused, turning its helmeted head to look directly at the spot where Hyun was hiding. We know you are watching. We know you are listening. We have studied your species for many months. We understand your capabilities. They are insufficient to oppose us. Dr. Mina was watching the broadcast feed from multiple cities around the world. The same scene was playing out everywhere. Alien ships landing, perfect soldiers in flowing armor. Identical surrender demands. 72 hours, she said to Juan. They're really confident. Look at them, Juan replied, pointing at the screen showing the aliens in Seoul. Look at that armor. It's like nothing we've ever seen. It's adapting to everything around them. Temperature, light, probably even air pressure. Their scans of our atmosphere must have been incredibly detailed. They wouldn't risk their soldiers if they weren't completely sure the environment was safe for them, Mina added. Commander Tae was on his 5th emergency call with world leaders. Every conversation was the same. The aliens had superior technology, superior numbers, and they had done their homework. Earth's militaries were discussing response options, but everyone knew the truth. Conventional weapons had already been tested against the ships. Nothing worked. Missiles, artillery, even experimental energy weapons just bounced off the alien hulls like raindrops. Commander, his communications officer called out. We're getting reports from industrial areas around the landing sites. Some kind of interference with local equipment? What kind of interference? Tae asked. Nothing major. Some factories near the Tokyo landing are reporting minor equipment failures. Corrosion-resistant pipes showing wear. Computer systems acting up. Tae nodded absently. With everything else happening, minor industrial problems seemed unimportant. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Around the world, alien forces were setting up what looked like processing centers, large temporary structures that could hold thousands of people. The message was clear. The Keltharians weren't here to destroy humanity. They were here to manage them, like farmers managing livestock. As night fell over Seoul, Dr. Hwan stood on the roof of his building, looking up at the alien ship that blotted out the stars. The armor of the Keltharian soldiers glowed softly in the darkness, their forms moving with perfect precision as they patrolled the streets below. Everything about them screamed superiority. Their technology, their confidence, their casual dismissal of human capabilities. They had planned this invasion perfectly, or so they thought. What the Keltharians didn't know was that Earth's atmosphere was not what their scans had told them. Yes, it was 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. But that was just the beginning of the story. Humanity had been changing their atmosphere for over 200 years. Every factory, every car, every chemical plant had been adding things to the air that didn't belong there. Things that didn't exist on any other world the Keltharians had conquered. The invasion clock was ticking. But so was something else. Something the aliens couldn't see, couldn't measure, and couldn't understand. The air itself was about to become humanity's greatest weapon. Captain Hyun moved carefully through the abandoned streets of Seoul. 24 hours had passed since the aliens landed, and the city felt like a ghost town. Most people had fled to the countryside or were hiding in their homes. His team of 6 soldiers followed behind him, keeping low and quiet. They were heading toward the alien landing zone to gather intelligence. Command needed to know what the Keltharians were really planning. Movement ahead, whispered Sergeant Park, pointing down the street. Hyun raised his binoculars and saw them. A patrol of 4 Keltharian soldiers walking down the main road like they owned it, which Hyun supposed they did now. The aliens moved with perfect coordination. Their liquid metal armor flowed and shifted as they walked, changing colors to match their surroundings. When they passed a red brick building, streaks of red appeared in their armor. Near a blue car, blue patterns emerged. Incredible technology, Park murmured. Too incredible, Hyun replied. No wonder they're so confident. The alien patrol stopped at what used to be a busy intersection. One of them raised its hand and suddenly a holographic display appeared in the air above them. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the city with glowing markers everywhere. Processing center construction 60% complete, one alien said in perfect Korean. Human relocation can begin in 48 hours. Any resistance detected? Another asked. Minimal. Their primitive weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. A few scattered military units are observing us, but they pose no threat. Hyun felt his jaw clench. Primitive weapons. That's all they were to these creatures. The aliens finished their discussion and continued their patrol. As they walked away, Hyun noticed something strange. The street where they had been standing looked different. Not obviously different, but something was off. Did you see that? He whispered to Park. See what? The ground where they were standing. Look at it. Park squinted at the asphalt. There were tiny marks, almost invisible, like the road surface had been slightly damaged. Probably nothing, Park said. Maybe their armor is heavier than it looks. Hyun made a mental note to report it anyway. Right now, any information about the aliens might be important. Across the city, Dr. Mina was having the strangest day of her career. Her atmospheric monitoring station was picking up readings that shouldn't exist. Juan, come look at this data, she called out. Dr. Juan walked over, carrying 2 cups of instant coffee. They had been working non-stop since the invasion began, trying to understand what was happening to their atmosphere. What am I looking at? He asked, setting down the coffee and peering at her screen. These are the atmospheric readings from around the alien landing sites. Look at the chemical composition. Juan studied the data for several minutes. The basic numbers looked normal. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, all at expected levels. But there were other things in the mix. Tiny amounts of compounds that shouldn't be there. These trace chemicals, he said slowly. Where are they coming from? That's what I've been trying to figure out. The concentrations are highest near industrial areas. Factories, chemical plants, refineries. But those have been there for decades. Why are we seeing changes now? Mina pulled up another screen showing historical data. We've always had these compounds in our air. We just never paid attention to them because they were in such small amounts. But look at this. She highlighted specific data points from the last 24 hours. Since the aliens landed, the concentrations of these industrial chemicals have increased by 12%. That's impossible. The factories have been shut down since the invasion started. Exactly. So why are we seeing more industrial chemicals in the air? Juan stared at the data, trying to make sense of it. Then a thought occurred to him. What if it's not that there are more chemicals? What if something is making the existing chemicals more active? Meanwhile, in an industrial district outside Seoul, Young-ho was having the worst day of his life. He was the maintenance supervisor for a chemical processing plant. And everything was breaking down at once. Sir, we've got another pipe failure in Section 7, his assistant Jin called out. Young-ho sighed and grabbed his toolbox. That was the 4th pipe failure since yesterday. These weren't old pipes either. They were made of materials specifically designed to resist chemical corrosion. When he reached Section 7, he found a scene that made no sense. A brand new pipe made of corrosion-resistant alloy had developed tiny holes along its entire length. The metal looked like it had been exposed to acid for months, not hours. This is impossible, he muttered, running his fingers along the damaged pipe. This alloy is supposed to last 20 years in this environment. Maybe it's a bad batch from the factory. Jin suggested, all of them? We've had failures in pipes installed over the last 5 years. Different suppliers, different installation dates. Young-ho took photos of the damage and made detailed notes. Something was very wrong, and it wasn't just the aliens. The very air around the plant seemed to be eating away at their equipment. Back at the alien landing site, Commander Kelnar was reviewing status reports from around the globe. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Human governments were in chaos, their militaries were helpless, and construction of processing centers was ahead of schedule. Sir, his technology officer reported, we're getting some minor alerts from ground forces. What kind of alerts? Equipment diagnostics. Nothing serious. Some environmental sensors are showing slightly higher readings than expected. Kelnar barely looked up from his reports. Atmospheric composition? Still within normal parameters. Nitrogen, oxygen, trace gases as expected. Our armor systems show no compatibility issues. Then ignore it. Human industrial activity has probably stirred up some dust or pollutants. Our equipment can handle anything this primitive planet can produce. The technology officer nodded and returned to his station. But as he worked, he noticed more alerts popping up on his screens. Helmet display issues, minor power fluctuations, sensor recalibration requests, all minor, all explainable, all individually unimportant, but they were happening more and more frequently. Dr. Mina had been awake for 36 hours straight, but she couldn't stop working. The data she was seeing was getting stranger by the hour. "Juan, I think I'm onto something," she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "What did you find?" "I've been comparing our atmospheric data with historical records from other industrial cities around the world. London, Detroit, Beijing, Mumbai. They're all showing the same patterns." She brought up a global map on her screen with colored overlays showing atmospheric chemical concentrations. "Look at this. Every area with heavy industrial activity for the last 50 years is showing increased atmospheric reactivity. But only near the alien landing sites." Juan studied the map. The pattern was unmistakable. "It's like something about the aliens is triggering a reaction with industrial pollutants." "But what?" "Their ships don't produce any emissions that we can detect. Their soldiers aren't interacting with our industrial equipment. Maybe it's not what they're doing. Maybe it's just their presence." Young Ho was getting desperate. Half the equipment in his plant was failing, and he couldn't explain why to his superiors. The company executives were demanding answers he didn't have. He decided to do something that went against every safety protocol in the book. He took an air sample from directly outside his facility and had it analyzed by a friend who worked at the university chemistry lab. The results came back 2 hours later, and they made no sense. "Your air sample contains over 300 different industrial compounds," his friend told him over the phone. "Most of them in tiny concentrations, but they're all there." "That's normal for an industrial area," Young Ho replied. "No, you don't understand. These compounds shouldn't be able to exist together in stable form. They should react with each other and break down into simpler molecules. But they're not. Not only are they not breaking down, they're becoming more concentrated. It's like something is preventing normal atmospheric chemistry from working." Young Ho felt a chill run down his spine. What could cause that? "I have no idea. But whatever it is, it's making your air incredibly corrosive to metal. No wonder your equipment is failing." Captain Hyun was on his third reconnaissance mission when he noticed the aliens were acting differently. They were still confident, still moving with perfect coordination. But something had changed. During his first mission, the alien patrol had moved casually through the city, barely paying attention to their surroundings. Now they were more alert, more cautious. "Sir, look at their armor," Sergeant Park whispered. Hyun focused his binoculars on the nearest alien soldier. The liquid metal armor was still shifting and adapting, but it seemed to be working harder. The color changes were more frequent, more dramatic. "It's like their armor is trying to adapt to something it can't quite handle," Park observed. As they watched, one of the aliens stopped walking and tapped the side of its helmet. A brief electronic whine echoed across the empty street. "Equipment malfunction?" Hyun wondered. The alien continued walking, but now Hyun could see small flickering lights on its armor. Diagnostic indicators maybe, or warning lights. For the first time since the invasion began, Captain Hyun allowed himself to feel a tiny spark of hope. Lieutenant Soo-jin crouched on the rooftop of an abandoned office building, her drone remote control steady in her hands. 48 hours had passed since the aliens landed, and she had been ordered to conduct close surveillance of their activities. The small reconnaissance drone buzzed silently above the alien encampment, its high-definition camera recording everything. Soo-jin watched the live feed on her tablet, zooming in on individual alien soldiers as they moved around their temporary base. "That's interesting," she whispered to herself. She had been watching the same patrol for 3 days now, and she was starting to notice differences. The aliens' perfect flowing armor wasn't quite as perfect as it had been on the first day. Soo-jin zoomed the camera in on one soldier's chest plate. The liquid metal surface, which had been mirror smooth on day one, now showed tiny imperfections. Microscopic pitting, like someone had been sandblasting it with the finest possible abrasive. She switched to another soldier and saw the same thing. And another. Every alien she could see clearly showed signs of surface wear on their armor. "Command, this is Raven 3. She spoke into her radio. "I'm seeing unusual wear patterns on enemy armor. Transmitting video now." Back at the UN Defense Command Center, Commander Tae watched Soo-jin's footage with growing interest. He called for Dr. Hwan and Dr. Mina to join him in the analysis room. "What am I looking at, doctors?" Tae asked as the three of them studied the drone footage. Dr. Hwan leaned closer to the screen. "The surface degradation is consistent with chemical corrosion, but it's happening incredibly slowly." "How slowly?" Tae wanted to know. Based on what I can see here, I'd estimate the damage has occurred over the last 48 hours. That's extremely fast for atmospheric corrosion, but probably not fast enough for the aliens to notice immediately. Dr. Mina pulled up her atmospheric data on another screen. Commander, we've been tracking unusual chemical activity around all the alien landing sites. The air around their bases is becoming more corrosive by the hour. You mean our air is attacking their equipment? Not attacking exactly. More like digesting it very, very slowly. Across the city, Young-ho was having an emergency meeting with his plant supervisors. Half of their equipment was now non-functional and the damage was spreading. Sir, I think I know what's causing the equipment failures, he told his boss. Director Kim. Please tell me it's something we can fix quickly, Kim replied, looking exhausted. It's the air, sir. Something has changed in the atmospheric chemistry around our plant. The air has become extremely corrosive to metal. That's impossible. Air doesn't just become corrosive overnight. Young-ho pulled out his tablet and showed Kim the chemical analysis results. Look at this data. Our local atmosphere now contains over 400 different industrial compounds. Most of them are things we've been putting into the air for decades, but now they're not breaking down naturally. What do you mean, not breaking down? Normally, when industrial chemicals are released into the atmosphere, they react with oxygen and sunlight and break down into harmless compounds. But something is preventing that from happening. The chemicals are staying active and building up in concentration. Director Kim studied the data with growing alarm. What could cause that? I don't know, sir, but I have a theory. Young-ho switched to a map showing the locations of industrial sites around Seoul. Look at this pattern. The equipment failures are worst at facilities closest to the alien landing site. The further away from the aliens, the less damage we see. You think the aliens are causing this somehow? I think their presence is interfering with normal atmospheric chemistry. Maybe their ships are generating some kind of field that prevents chemical breakdown. Kim was quiet for a long moment. If you're right, then their technology is accidentally creating a corrosive atmosphere that's destroying our equipment. Yes, sir. But there's something else. Young-ho hesitated before continuing. If our industrial equipment is being corroded this quickly, what do you think is happening to their equipment? Meanwhile, in the Keltharian command ship hovering over Seoul, Technology Officer Vextar was beginning to worry. Commander Kelnar, we're seeing increased equipment alerts from ground forces, he reported. What kind of alerts? Kelnar asked, not looking up from his tactical displays. Armor diagnostics are showing minor surface degradation across all units. Helmet displays are requiring more frequent recalibration. Communication systems are experiencing intermittent static. Atmospheric interference? That's what I thought initially. But the problems are getting worse, not better. Our equipment is supposed to adapt to local conditions within the first few hours of deployment. Kelnar finally looked up from his screens. Show me the diagnostic data. Vextar brought up a three-dimensional display showing the status of every Keltharian soldier on the planet. Each figure was color-coded based on equipment performance. What Kelnar saw made him frown. Why are they all showing yellow? He asked. Yellow indicates minor equipment degradation, sir. Nothing critical yet, but all systems are operating below optimal parameters. All of them? Yes, sir. Every soldier, on every continent. The degradation rate is consistent across all units. Kelnar studied the display more carefully. In his years of military service, he had never seen such a uniform equipment degradation pattern. Usually, some soldiers would have problems while others operated normally. What's the atmospheric analysis showing? Nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%, all within expected parameters, but what? We're detecting trace amounts of chemical compounds that weren't in our original scans. Nothing dangerous individually, but there are hundreds of them. Industrial pollutants? That would be my assessment, sir. The humans have been contaminating their atmosphere for centuries. Our long-range scans couldn't detect such small concentrations. Kelnar nodded slowly. Our armor can handle industrial pollutants. Continue monitoring, but don't worry about trace contamination. What Kelnar didn't understand was that Earth's industrial pollutants weren't like anything in the galaxy. Most civilizations either kept their atmospheres clean or polluted them with simple, predictable chemicals. Earth was unique. Dr. Mina had been working with Jin Woo, a chemical engineer from Seoul National University, to understand exactly what was happening to their atmosphere. Doctor, what you're describing shouldn't be possible, Jin Woo said, studying her data. But it is happening. We have proof. I understand that. What I'm saying is that atmospheric chemistry doesn't work this way. Industrial chemicals should break down naturally when exposed to sunlight and atmospheric oxygen. But they're not breaking down. No, they're not. And that suggests something is interfering with normal photochemical reactions in the atmosphere. Dr. Mina leaned forward. What could cause that kind of interference? Electromagnetic fields, maybe. Or some kind of catalytic inhibitor that prevents normal chemical reactions. The alien ships? Jinwoo nodded slowly. It's possible. If their propulsion systems or defensive fields are disrupting atmospheric chemistry, they could be accidentally creating a chemical soup that's harmful to their own equipment. How harmful? That depends on how long the effect lasts and how concentrated the chemicals become. But theoretically, you could create atmospheric conditions that would corrode almost any metal given enough time. Dr. Huan joined their conversation, bringing coffee and printouts of the latest atmospheric readings. The chemical concentrations are still increasing, he reported. We're now detecting over 600 different industrial compounds in the atmosphere around alien landing sites. 600? Jinwoo looked shocked. That's impossible. There aren't that many industrial chemicals in use. Unless they're combining to form new compounds, Dr. Mina suggested. Complex atmospheric chemistry, Jinwoo mused. Industrial chemicals that would normally break down separately are instead combining with each other to form more complex, more corrosive compounds. And the alien's presence is somehow catalyzing this process? It's the only explanation that makes sense. Lieutenant Su Jin was back on her rooftop, watching the alien base through her drone cameras. What she saw made her heart race with excitement. The aliens were acting differently. Their perfect coordination was still there, but they seemed more cautious, more alert, and their armor was definitely showing more damage. Command, this is Raven 3. The enemy appears to be experiencing increasing equipment difficulties. Can you be more specific? Commander Tay's voice crackled through her radio. Sir, I'm watching an alien patrol right now. 3 of the 4 soldiers have visible damage to their helmet displays. One of them keeps tapping the side of his head like he's trying to fix a communication problem. Any change in their behavior? They're moving more slowly, sir. And they keep looking around like they're worried about something. This is not the same confident force that landed 3 days ago. Commander Tay felt a surge of hope. Keep watching, Lieutenant. Record everything. As Su Jin continued her surveillance, she noticed something else. The aliens were starting to avoid certain areas of the city. Specifically, they were staying away from the industrial districts where the air was thick with chemical pollution. Command, I think they're starting to realize something is wrong. They're avoiding the areas with the worst air quality. Commander Tay sat in the emergency briefing room, surrounded by reports from around the world. 60 hours had passed since the invasion began, and the news was finally starting to turn in humanity's favor. What are we seeing globally? He asked his intelligence chief. Sir, reports from every continent show the same pattern. Alien forces are withdrawing from industrial cities and concentrating in rural areas with cleaner air. Tay studied the global map on the main screen. Red dots showed alien positions, and it was clear they were avoiding the heavily polluted urban centers. They're running from our cities? It appears so, sir. In China, alien forces have completely evacuated from Beijing and Shanghai. In the United States, they've pulled back from Detroit, Houston, and Los Angeles. Same pattern everywhere. Captain Hyun entered the briefing room, still wearing his field gear from the latest reconnaissance mission. Captain, what's your assessment of enemy forces? Tay asked. Sir, they're in trouble. Real trouble. Hyun pulled out his tablet and showed video footage from the morning patrol. Look at this armor damage. The video showed Keltharian soldiers whose once perfect armor was now clearly deteriorating. The liquid metal surfaces were pitted and scarred. Some helmets showed cracks around the visors. Several soldiers moved awkwardly as if their armor joints were stiffening. How bad is it? Tay wanted to know. Based on what I observed, I'd estimate their equipment is operating at maybe 60% efficiency, and it's getting worse by the hour. Dr. Mina burst into the briefing room, carrying a tablet and looking more excited than anyone had seen her since the invasion started. Commander, we've figured it out. We know exactly what's happening to them. Tell me everything. Dr. Mina activated the main display and brought up her atmospheric analysis data. Earth's atmosphere is unique in the galaxy. Most planets either have clean natural atmospheres or simple pollution from basic industrial processes. But we've been pumping complex chemicals into our air for over 200 years. She highlighted specific data points on the screen. Coal burning, oil refining, chemical manufacturing, automotive exhaust, industrial solvents. We've created an atmospheric cocktail that contains thousands of different compounds, many of which don't exist naturally anywhere else. And this is affecting the aliens how? Dr. Juan stepped forward to continue the explanation. Their equipment was designed for known atmospheric compositions. Clean air, simple pollutants, things they've encountered before. But our atmosphere is chemically unique. It's like they designed armor to work underwater, then jumped into a swimming pool full of acid. Commander Tay began to understand. Our pollution is destroying their equipment? More than that, Dr. Mina said. Their presence is making our pollution worse. Their ships generate some kind of field that prevents atmospheric chemicals from breaking down naturally. So instead of our pollutants dispersing harmlessly, they're building up and becoming more concentrated and more corrosive. Lieutenant Sujin's voice came over the communication system. Command, this is Raven 3. I'm observing the main alien base. Something big is happening. Put her on speaker, Tay ordered. Sir, the aliens are in full emergency mode. I can see them frantically working on their equipment. Several soldiers appear to have life support failures. They're being carried back to their ships. Life support failures? Yes, sir. Their armor isn't just corroding on the outside. Whatever's eating away at the metal is affecting their breathing systems, their power supplies, everything. Jin Wu, the chemical engineer, had been listening quietly. Now he spoke up. Commander, if I may suggest something? Go ahead. Instead of trying to fight the aliens directly, what if we make our atmosphere even more corrosive? We could deliberately increase industrial activity in areas where they're still operating. Deliberately pollute our own air. Think of it as temporary atmospheric weaponization. We fire up every factory, every chemical plant, every oil refinery we can safely operate. We make the air so corrosive that their equipment fails completely. Young Ho, who had been brought in as an expert on industrial systems, nodded enthusiastically. It could work, sir. My plant has been shut down since the invasion, but we could restart operations within hours. And if we run the systems at maximum output, we could saturate the local atmosphere with industrial chemicals. How long would it take to see results? Based on what we've observed so far, maybe 6 to 12 hours for significant equipment degradation. Commander Tay looked around the room at his advisors. It was a crazy plan, but it might be their only chance. Do it. Contact every industrial facility within 50 kilometers of alien positions. Get them back online immediately. Maximum output. All safety protocols suspended. Within 2 hours, factories across South Korea were roaring back to life. Chemical plants that had been quiet for days began pumping clouds of industrial emissions into the air. Oil refineries fired up their processing units. Steel mills restarted their furnaces. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Dr. Mina watched her atmospheric monitoring, displays with amazement as chemical concentrations around Seoul skyrocketed. It's working, she announced. Atmospheric corrosivity has increased by over 300% in the last hour. What about the aliens? Lieutenant Sujin's voice crackled over the radio with barely contained excitement. Command, you need to see this. The enemy base is in chaos. She transmitted live video from her drone. The scene showed Keltharian soldiers staggering around their base, their armor smoking and sparking. Several had collapsed completely. Others were frantically trying to remove damaged equipment. Sir, I count at least 20 aliens with complete armor failure. They're trying to get back to their ships, but some of them aren't making it. Captain Hyun, who was observing from a different position, added his report. Confirmed. Multiple enemy casualties. Their armor is literally dissolving. I can see metal components falling off their bodies as they move. In the Keltharian command ship, Commander Kelnar was facing the worst military disaster of his career. Sir, we have critical system failures across all ground units, Vextar reported, his voice tight with panic. How critical? 70% of our soldiers have compromised life support. 30% have complete armor failure. We're losing troops every minute. Kelnar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His perfect soldiers, his invincible army was being defeated by air pollution. What changed? The atmospheric readings were stable until 2 hours ago. The humans, sir. They've restarted their industrial operations. They're deliberately saturating the atmosphere with corrosive chemicals. On purpose? Yes, sir. Intelligence reports show coordinated industrial activity around all our remaining positions worldwide. Kelnar felt something he had never experienced before. the taste of defeat. "Sir, we need to evacuate all ground forces immediately," Vexitar urged. "If we don't get them back to the ships within the next few hours, we'll lose the entire invasion force." Back on Earth, the news was spreading rapidly. Reports from around the world showed the same pattern. Alien forces in full retreat, their equipment failing, their soldiers collapsing. Young Ho stood outside his chemical plant, watching thick plumes of industrial smoke rise into the sky. For the first time in his life, he was happy to see air pollution. "How long can we keep this up?" he asked Dr. Huan, who had come to observe the operation. "As long as we need to. We have decades of experience making our air toxic. Turns out we're very good at it." Jinwoo was monitoring the chemical composition of the atmosphere in real time. "The corrosivity levels are beyond anything I've ever seen," he reported. "We've basically turned our atmosphere into a mild acid bath. No metal alloy could survive this for more than a few hours." Dr. Mina received a priority communication from Commander Tay. "Doctor, I need an assessment. How badly are we damaging their equipment?" "Commander, based on our atmospheric readings and field observations, I estimate their armor will be completely non-functional within 12 hours. Their ships might last longer, but any alien outside of protective environments will face life-threatening equipment failure." "And the humans? How are we handling the increased pollution?" "We're used to it, sir. We've been breathing this stuff for generations. Our bodies can handle short-term exposure to industrial pollutants much better than alien equipment can." Lieutenant Su Jin transmitted another update from her observation post. "Command, the aliens are abandoning their ground positions. Repeat, full evacuation in progress. I can see their ships beginning to power up for departure." Commander Tay allowed himself a smile for the first time in 3 days. "All units, this is command. The enemy is in full retreat. Continue industrial operations until all alien forces have departed Earth's atmosphere." As night fell over Seoul, the city skyline was lit not by alien ships, but by the flames and smoke of human industry working at maximum capacity. The very pollution that environmentalists had been fighting for decades had become humanity's salvation. The invasion was failing, not because of superior human weapons or tactics, but because Earth's air had become too dirty for aliens to breathe. The 72-hour deadline was approaching, but now it was the aliens who were running out of time. The 72-hour deadline arrived with a dawn that looked different from any in Earth's history. Instead of alien ships blotting out the sun, thick clouds of industrial smoke rose from every major city on the planet. Dr. Huan stood on the roof of his monitoring station, watching the Keltharian command ship that had hung over Seoul for 3 days. The massive vessel was no longer the silent, intimidating presence it had been. Now it shook and vibrated as its engines strained to lift it away from Earth's poisonous atmosphere. "Atmospheric readings?" He called down to Dr. Mina, who was still working at her computer despite not sleeping for almost 48 hours. "Chemical saturation at maximum levels," she replied. "The air around their ship is so corrosive it would eat through steel in minutes." Commander Tay's voice crackled over the radio from the command center. "All stations, report status of alien forces." Reports came in from around the world. London, New York, Beijing, Mumbai. Every major city where aliens had landed was now reporting the same thing. Full alien evacuation in progress. Captain Hyun was positioned with his team at the edge of the alien landing zone in Seoul, watching the final stages of the Keltharian retreat. What he saw would stay with him for the rest of his life. Alien soldiers were stumbling toward their evacuation ships, their once perfect armor falling apart as they moved. Some had lost entire pieces of their equipment. Others crawled on hands and knees. Their armor's power systems completely failed. "It's like watching snowmen melt," Sergeant Park whispered beside him. "Except snowmen don't feel pain," Hyun replied, watching an alien soldier collapse just meters from safety. Other soldiers tried to help, but their own equipment was failing too badly to be effective. "Should we help them?" Park asked. Hyun considered it. These were the same beings who had planned to relocate all of humanity like livestock, but watching them suffer as their life support systems dissolved around them was hard to watch. "No," he decided, "but get it on video. The world needs to see this." In the Keltharian command ship, Commander Kelnar was facing the most humiliating moment of his military career. His communications officer was trying to establish contact with Earth's leadership to discuss terms of surrender. "Sir, the humans are responding to our transmission," the officer reported. Put them through. Commander Tay's image appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but determined. This is Commander Tay of the United Nations Defense Forces. Are you ready to discuss the terms of your surrender? Kellner felt his teeth clench. 3 days ago, he had been offering surrender terms to these primitive humans. Now the situation was completely reversed. Commander Tay, we are prepared to withdraw our forces from your planet immediately. We ask only for safe passage to evacuate our remaining personnel. Your personnel who are currently dying because they can't handle our atmosphere. Our atmospheric analysis was incomplete. We did not anticipate the unique chemical composition of your air. Commander Tay leaned forward. You mean you didn't expect our pollution to be deadly to your equipment? Correct. Your industrial contamination has created atmospheric conditions that are incompatible with our technology, and yet you were planning to force billions of humans to live under your rule in this same atmosphere that's killing your soldiers? Kellner had no answer for that. The irony was not lost on him. Lieutenant Su Jin, still maintaining her surveillance from the rooftop, transmitted real-time footage of the evacuation. Command, this is Raven 3. The last alien ground units are boarding their ships now. I count multiple casualties being carried aboard. Their armor is completely destroyed. Young-ho watched from his chemical plant as the alien ships began to rise into the sky. The massive vessels, which had descended with such confidence 3 days ago, now struggled to escape Earth's atmosphere. Their hulls, which had been mirror-bright, were now dull and pitted. Look at that, he said to his assistant Jin. Their ship hulls are corroding too. How is that possible? They've been up in the sky, away from the worst of the pollution. The industrial chemicals we've been pumping out are rising into the upper atmosphere. Even their ships aren't safe anymore. Dr. Mina confirmed Young-ho's observation from her monitoring station. We're detecting elevated chemical concentrations at altitudes up to 30,000 feet. The entire lower atmosphere has become corrosive to their technology. Jin Wu, the chemical engineer, was documenting everything for future study. This is unprecedented, he told Dr. Huan. We've essentially weaponized our own air pollution. Future civilizations will study this as a case study in environmental warfare. Environmental warfare we didn't even know we were capable of, Dr. Huan replied. The alien evacuation was not going smoothly. Several ships were showing signs of structural stress as they climbed through the chemically saturated atmosphere. One vessel, trying to evacuate soldiers from the industrial district of Incheon, was forced to make an emergency landing when its hull plating began to fail. Captain Hyun received orders to secure the crash site, but not to engage unless attacked. What do we do if we find survivors? Sergeant Park asked as they approached the downed alien ship. We offer them medical assistance, Hyun replied. We're not barbarians. They found 12 Keltharian survivors inside the ship, their armor completely dissolved, their breathing apparatus barely functioning. They were gasping in Earth's air, which was toxic to their biology even without the industrial chemicals. Call for hazmat teams, Hyun ordered. Get them into clean air chambers. It was a strange feeling rescuing the beings who had come to enslave his planet. But Hyun knew it was the right thing to do. In orbit above Earth, the Keltharian fleet was regrouping. Commander Kellner was receiving damage reports from all his ships. Sir, 15 vessels have significant hull damage from atmospheric exposure. 3 ships have lost life support capabilities. We have over 400 casualties from ground operations. Casualties from air pollution? Kellner said bitterly. How do I explain that to High Command? Sir, perhaps we should classify this planet as a chemical hazard zone and recommend it be avoided by all Keltharian forces, his science officer suggested. No, Kellner replied slowly. We should recommend it be left alone entirely. These humans have accidentally created the perfect planetary defense system. Back on Earth, the celebration was beginning. News broadcasts around the world showed the same images. Alien ships fleeing into space, their hulls corroded and smoking. But the celebration was tempered by the realization of what they had done to achieve victory. We saved our planet by poisoning our atmosphere. Dr. Mina said to Dr. Huan as they watched the last alien ship disappear into the upper atmosphere. We've been poisoning our atmosphere for 200 years, Dr. Huan replied. Today we just did it on purpose. And what happens now? Do we keep the air this toxic? We'll have to find a balance. Clean enough for us to live in, dirty enough to discourage future invasions. Commander Tay was fielding communications from world leaders, all asking the same question: how long should they maintain maximum industrial output? Until we're sure they're not coming back, was his answer. Young-ho was already thinking about the long-term implications as he supervised the shutdown of his plant's maximum output operations. We've proven that industrial pollution can be used as a defensive weapon, he told his team. But we've also proven that we can control it when we need to. You mean we can make our air more or less toxic on command?
Exactly.
It's like having a planetary defense shield made of chemistry instead of energy. Jin Woo was compiling his final report on the atmospheric warfare that had saved Earth. The key factor, he wrote, was not just the presence of industrial chemicals, but their complexity and concentration. Earth's atmosphere now contains chemical combinations that don't exist anywhere else in the known galaxy. This makes our planet essentially uninhabitable for most alien technologies. Lieutenant Sujin filed her final surveillance report as the last alien ship disappeared from her drone's cameras. Enemy forces have completely evacuated Earth's atmosphere. No signs of return. Planetary defense through atmospheric contamination has proven 100% effective. As evening fell over Seoul, the city's skyline was still thick with industrial smoke, but the alien ships were gone. Dr. Huan and Dr. Mina stood together on their rooftop, breathing air that was toxic enough to dissolve alien armor but perfectly normal for human lungs. So what do we call this victory? Dr. Mina asked. I don't know. The pollution war? The chemical defense? How about the day we learned that being dirty isn't always a bad thing? Dr. Huan smiled. Works for me. In space, Commander Kelnar was transmitting his final report to the Keltharian High Command. Planet classification. Earth. Status. Avoid at all costs. Atmospheric composition incompatible with Keltharian technology. Recommend immediate quarantine zone designation. He paused before adding the most humiliating line he had ever written in a military report. Invasion force defeated by enemy air pollution. No repeat mission recommended. The transmission ended, and the Keltharian fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth far behind. On the surface of the planet, humanity was left to contemplate a strange truth. Their greatest environmental failure had become their greatest military success. The aliens had thought Earth's atmosphere was harmless. They were wrong.